Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar in conversation with Philip Kim, who is the owner of Paramount Dental Arts. This is the third of three conversations this fall with Nick Azzara, who is the CEO of DNS Consulting Group, and I asking questions of successful dental lab owners. Nick is has deep experience in the industry. He's worked in labs, he's worked in manufacturers. He's now working with labs as a consultant, and also has deep experience and knowledge of DSOs, which is definitely a future topic for us. So why is Labstar doing this? Welcome, Nick. Labstar is doing this because we really believe in education for the industry. We think the industry is growing and evolving and getting more sophisticated. And we think that it's important that labs grow with this complexity, that they get better at running their businesses. So we're inviting successful, insightful people to come in and share how they've achieved their success. Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's been thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I know we have a great conversation teed up with Philip Kim, another innovative mind in dentistry. If any of you missed the first two programs, Jeff put together an amazing series with Jeff Hoffman and then Danny Sacker, two very innovative lab owners that have interesting approaches to managing their business, and that's what it was all about for me. And then I appreciate what Jeff has done to bring these minds together so they can share kind of their thoughts on how they're running their business and their perspective, and also a little bit of inspiration and maybe reflectivity, that we kind of look back and see how we all are approaching these the challenges of today. So we'll give it back to Jeff, and really excited to start talking to Philip.
Thanks, Nick. And this is, we wanted to share before we start, just very briefly, this is the framework that we're going to go through. These are the topics that we're going to touch on. You know, Philip's, where he came from, his philosophy, technology, data analysis, team building, client management, risk taking in the future. Now, we're going to try to get to all of these, and it's likely that we'll get to many of them, hopefully all of them, but we're also going to follow the conversation where it goes. So with that, I'd like to introduce Philip Kim. Philip, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we wanted to hear, your story is not the typical lab owner story. You went to West Point, U.S. Military Academy. You were an Army officer. How did you move from there to becoming a dental lab owner and operator?
Yeah, so, you know, when college, West Point, I was in the military during that big surge of, we had Iraq, Afghanistan. I think the whole military was deploying every other day. But when I got out, I went to business school, got my MBA. And from there, my dad was actually doing a little bit of this, and really didn't understand too much of it. But from a kind of a business background, I saw there was a lot of opportunity. It was an exciting industry. Well, I mean, exciting in the aspect that I didn't know. I guess, you know, you go to business school, they talk about Google and all these things making crazy innovation, and but then I look at the lab and I'm like, why isn't that happening there? And when you see some discrepancy, then I see opportunity. I say, wow, this is exciting. We can bring in things to the lab industry. And so, yeah, so from there, I came, you know, I built a small company, lab-oriented company out in, you know, Virginia. And then I came over to California to help my dad. You know, he was in the lab. He's your typical one-man lab or two-man lab. He had 2, 3 employees. I mean, and then he grew to a certain size, and then I came from business school and helped him grow that one into even a bigger size. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into the lab industry, and I've really enjoyed it ever since.
How would you describe or, yeah, how would you talk about your lab, just to introduce it? What should people understand about it and how you approach it?
I think, fundamentally, we are based in the idea of a crown and bridge lab. We do essentially, we stay to our core competency, which is kind of the digital end. Um, and yeah, I mean, we don't really try to move out of our expertise areas. And if we do, we think real hard about it. We analyze, we figure out, like, is this the path that we take? Otherwise, we actually make a very hard cut and say, no, we're not doing those products that maybe even traditional Crown Bridge labs do. Um, yeah, so we're just very hyper focused on a handful of items, and then we kind of let the rest, we just kind of ignore the rest, really.
Philip, could you frame for everybody just a little bit about your lab, the size of the lab as far as people, footprint, facility, and also to just the basic philosophy here, you coming from that military background and now running your lab, what's your, a little bit about your basic overarching philosophy of, what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so fundamentally, we're in multiple states. Our main manufacturing headquarters being in Huntington Beach, California. We've been moving around a little, so our address has been a little funky, but yeah, and then we've got a few hundred people. From the few hundred people, we do, the philosophy really is to, I don't know, it's probably not the best analogy, but I always like saying, like, we want to be Amazon, kind of frictionless, technology driven. There's so many gray areas in the lab, and they have to be respected and acknowledged for sure. But then it also leads to a lot of frustrations. And the idea is kind of like Amazon, 2 days you get this product. It's predictable, it's fast, and it works. I mean, there's no fundamental problem with the fact that it actually works. And so that's kind of where we want to be, is like kind of in the Amazon kind of realm. We really stay away from the extreme high end. I mean, we've got wonderful technicians from everywhere. We've got a lot of talent from different places, and they're amazing technicians. But despite that, we kind of still stick with our core competencies and stick with. We don't present ourselves as, hey, we're going to spend 70 hours on one tooth for you. That's not something we're built to do.
Was that a tough
yeah.
Concept for everybody to, technicians tend to, dive into and see things black and white. Here you've got this frictionless kind of description of how you go about doing business. Is it tough to get everybody on the same page and behave that way each and every day? And also, a couple hundred technicians, that's no nominal amount. How long did it take? Did you see stages where you got up to that level?
It just kind of happened, it kept growing. In terms of frustration of technicians, yeah, you get like, well, I mean, I'm sure there was frustrations on the employee's part, but as a lab owner, you're just kind of like, some of the things, doctors would be like, hey, can you do this crazy case? I'm willing to pay an additional, this huge fee, and just make this right for me. And then you have to turn down all these things. And it's just very, that's frustrating, because you're like, I've got the technicians, they could do a great job. But being hyper focused and turning down that type of, especially when you're struggling, when you're smaller, and even when you're growing, every dollar almost matters, because lab seems to have a capital intensive. It's very capital intensive. You got machines, so and then you've got to amortize those machines over years, and if they're not running, I mean, there's all these like factors of running. You know, we're not Ford. You know, we're not these heavy duty manufacturers that are lean manufacturers. Everyone tries to, and what Global may be the best at it, and still, if you think about it, the other industries dominate the lab on how better lean manufacturing they do. And so we're just built with tons of inefficiencies, and so money's always tight. I mean, extremely tight all the time.
In our previous
so it's kind of
conversation,
frustrating.
I'm sorry. In our previous conversations, you've talked about in terms of philosophy, sort of efficiency, and it sounds like you want the efficiency, frictionless experience of, say, an Amazon, but without necessarily the breadth of products. And when we talked about efficiency before, you talked about a combination of people, technology, and finance. Is that how you think about it, or are my notes not right there? Like, what is that combination that allows you to get efficiency?
Well, that's true. There are efficiencies in different realms of business, right? Just, you know, different sectors of business. And particularly in the lab world, you know, it's a little murky, but like in terms of efficiency and technology, there's a lot of great technology out there. We've got manufacturers, you know, that make, you know, great things for us, but there's still not an ecosystem. And so we have to essentially, so what we did is like a few things, right? One thing is like create macros. A lot of things are just like brute amount of like labor. It's not even skilled labor at half the time. You're just moving a file from here to here, and then like typing in this data point, and then you're gonna nest it. So like some nesting software that we use, you know, it's, I bet most of the labs use it. It's called Millbox, and you just drag a bunch of teeth into, you know, the job, and it's just really cumbersome. There's a lot of labor that goes into it. Great software, but so we built just a macro, spent some time to build a computer program, you know, spent a little bit of money and a little bit of frustration and a little bit of time. You know, we were late on a bunch of cases, I'm sure, and just because we're trying to test this out. But now that we created it, one person can do the job of 3, 4, 5. We just let the macros run, and they just manage a host of macros instead of nesting a bunch of teeth. Like, so we use technology to really create that efficiency. So now it's how many computers do I have, as opposed to how many people do I have that understand how to do this and do all these things. I'd rather have one really good person, just phenomenal person, than 10 kind of okay people who are okay devoted to the job. And so, I mean, that goes back to our hiring practices. We get many applications every day. We don't hire many people a day. We maybe hire a single percentage point of all the applications we actually ever get. And there's a reason for that. It's just the way we're built and the way we like to, and that creates efficiencies.
Philip, before you get into some of the, you know, just the employee team building and all of those other points, but could you go back to that macro question? You know, do you have a full-time IT person there at your size? Did you have to outsource some of that developmental work when you looked at macros? You know, who decided that a macro was needed in the first place?
The macro was really decided, like I saw it as the need. I've identified it, but in terms of the execution and things like that, we've got a lot of the lab software, really, like the nesting software and like the crown building software, they're not that fancy as people kind of like think. You know, you see these like magazines, like, you know, like LMT, you see these like ads that like say very technology driven thing. They're actually, it's very simplistic programs. So we just, you know, in this sense, macros, very simple. We just went to a college kid and said, hey, can you build a macro? I don't have much money. I'm always short of money because the growth we're doing, and we're trying to be conservative. We don't buy crazy things. We don't live in a palace of like, we're a lab. Everyone's been to a few man lab. We're still look the same, just more square footage. We're trying to use every square inch of the place. We do what things that make sense. We do time studies, but very informal, like, get to the 80% solution, execute. Like time studies in business school, they make this all, a crazy thing about like measuring this and doing that. And well, why not just get a stopwatch and just try it a few times and be like, oh, makes sense. Let's put that machine there. You can get to, and then you can get really efficient just taking all the low hanging fruit because there's so much in labs. So for macros, we just go, hey, we don't need a perfect macro. You can fail a little time. Can you help us? I can't give you much. I can give you not what a full IT person, which would be very expensive, a coder. So we just hired some college kid, amazing guy, really smart, and he was able to execute a lot of things. Everything from outsourcing to data entry to nesting, because we've got fragments everywhere in the lab industry. Data entry is huge. Think about the time I used to download cases from Itero, put all the admin information in. It was just so cumbersome. And I remember the Itero module just taking forever. And I was just like, okay, next step. After a few hours, I'm like, all I did was input a few cases, and that was my, and I'm
Right.
like, what kind of value am I bringing to this? So we just created macros. We're just very simple. Just efficiencies are kind of big for us.
And is that just some of the philosophy that carries through to all the laboratory and how you're working? You're always looking for those efficiencies and those little edges, trying to improve processes, improve people's interactions, improve training. And, if you wanted to kind of dovetail into that employee experience, is that how you kind of look at the world?
Yeah. And like we said before, I was in the military for probably more years than I was actually in the lab. So my experience really comes from back then and kind of lessons learned. Kind of one of the things that stuck with me is when you graduate or a little before, some of the Army officers tell you, it's a military academy, they tell you, hey, when you go into your first unit, you will be an officer. You will outrank essentially everyone in your unit right there. But when you walk in, I don't want to be crude, it just said, shut your mouth and just watch. It says, I know you're in charge. Everybody understands that, but you just need to watch. Don't put input. You'll have a million ideas, but just watch and learn. And that's what I really take on an everyday basis. Sure, there's a bunch of things I think of. I'm like, that looks wrong and that looks wrong and we got to fix this. But there's usually a reason why people are doing it that way. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they want to be efficient. It's just there's actually these nuanced reasons. And if you just jump in with the solution, it just never works out. So one of those things is I look for efficiencies, but I try to stay essentially quiet and ask questions instead of proposing solutions. And it helps. Employees feel more empowered. They help with the solutions. Maybe it'd be a little faster in the short term. I'd be like, I can identify this or that, but in the long term, it's a whole lot better for employee morale. And maybe the final solution is probably better too.
But there's an interesting point here about leadership, which is that you carve time out to listen and evaluate. I mean, it sounds like it probably comes very naturally to you, but is there even a number is there like 5% of your time? If you think about it in terms of a work day, because everyone's working against the clock. Are you doing 2 hours, 4 hours a week of kind of walk and talk and understanding and listening and asking questions?
Actually, the majority of my day. I I think up to there, I mean, if you think about, again, back into the Army, um, what generals used to do, they're in charge of thousands of people. And, I was deployed multiple times to every region in the world. And generals in big battles, or not in battles, they used to be just, what they would do is they would go into a helicopter, go fly high above a battle or whatnot, skirmishes, or they would just listen, they, anything to get closer and try to understand what's going on.
Mhm.
And they're doing it at scales of 20,000, 50,000. Like, their scale is big. And I'd imagine like that's what, CEOs try to do. But then you get all these corporate things. But, at 10 man, 5 man, 100, 500, you can actually spend a lot of your time. And as long as you hire the best people to handle your finance, handle your maybe not big strategy, but handle the other portions, HR, things like that, and trust them to do the job that that you've kind of commissioned them to do. Then just being amongst the technicians, I think yields me better, and I know more about what's going on. I know, for example, I know if we're going to have a slew of um, angry doctor calls, like I know it almost a week prior to, like, because I know we were making mistakes here, and I know we worked through it, and we're going to fix it. But I know that lag, and I'm almost better prepared to answer questions, um, help customer service, be valued to my team as much as um, I'm able to do. But I couldn't do that if I was sitting in a desk typing up some reports, trying to do some balance sheet, and I'm very equipped to do that. I went to business school. It's very natural to me. I can move numbers on Excel, but yeah, at this level, tactical is still trumps this kind of corporate governance type idea.
So, in alignment with that, your tactical approach, right? I think everybody has this kind of struggle with getting constant improvement, working with everybody, and then having some sort of meetings, right? You know, right, implementing, discovering something, and then finding a way to implement it. And whether you do it live or you do it standing up in 10-minute meetings, do you do morning huddles? Do you do formal meetings once a week? What's your thoughts on how you structure that?
Meetings. That's interesting. I don't know a single person who likes them. They're necessary for sure. But I leave meetings for me to my managers to do what they feel is their best style. Since every manager has a different style, I fortunately have the best in the industry. I swear, we've got, if not the top 1%ers, right? We've got people who are responsible, give it their all. They're amazing, amazing folks. And I let them use their style of leadership and their style of management. That being said, I would almost on a daily basis, kind of morning and evening, just very casually, hey, is there anything I should know? Or is there anything you would like to talk about? And just kind of keeping an open door is one thing, but not inviting people, just not really an open door policy. If you just go, hey, it's an open door, come whenever you want, and no one comes in there, it's probably because you're just, you're doing something wrong. You're not being, maybe you don't realize it or something. But for me, I open the door and say, hey, and then go back to them and say, hey, you got something you want to talk about, chat about, something concerns you, what's going on? Super informal, but it happens on a daily basis, kind of in the morning before something explodes, right? Because we've got accounts from Canada to Puerto Rico. I mean, we're talking think about the time zone differences. By the time California wakes up, East Coast could be a disaster, right? We could have a lot of doctors with things that don't fit or something happening. They want advice or whatever the case is. There could be a lot of things to handle. So the moment we wake up, we still just take a breather. Hey, what's going on? Something I can help with. And then in the evening, what's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? because my role is really an enabler. I'm not there to give as much tactical direction, but give support to everyone who's trying to make it happen for me. Yeah, because they're the backbone, really.
As that enabler here, for your managers, it's really interesting how you structured this kind of informal but formal ongoing process of tapping into what's happening each and every day and doing it consciously. What do you do as far as, and then to get everybody up to speed? Part of the challenge, I think, for everybody is to continuously train their people, right? So everybody evolves and they evolve with the higher expectation of the business. How do you how do you kind of approach this employee development within the structure of your company? Is there a formal training program? Is there a mentoring program? Is there you're bringing people to others? What's your thoughts on that?
Right. Okay. So aside from all this California rules and whatnot, let's be realistic here.
Right. Thank you.
California is very strict on different labor laws. But that being said, the approach that I take is, hey, you do your job the best as you can, all day long, whatever your shift is, whatever your timing is. And the moment you clock out, right, you can go to anyone and learn the skill that you'd like to learn. And if they do say no, I will find you someone that will mentor you and help you learn a skill that you would like to learn. So for me, people who don't want to develop won't develop. People who want to develop, they've got the drive, they'll take it all the way. And for me to try to pull, especially at scale, pull people who just are happy with where they are, or maybe they're not happy but don't want to do anything about it. My philosophy really is I can't help those people. People who are happy where they are, I'm not going to show them, hey, this is a better job, or look at this, you can laterally or move this way, you can be a manager. You don't want to, if that's not your skill set and you're just happy designing crowns, by all means, design a way to what makes you happy. It's really hard to just kind of pull those people up, and that just happens once in a while. If I see someone like really not performing to their own potential and I know they can, which is extremely rare, the people with potential or drive, they'll do it themselves. I tell them, hey, whatever resources, I will mill 100 crowns for you so you can practice. Like, the cost is nothing. I'm not gonna if you want to take some time with the managers, we'll do it instantaneously, and you will do it as long as you want. You want to do it for 6 months, a year, all night long, I'll ask one of the managers to stay and help you. But that being said, I'm not going to make it easy for you. You are going to do your job, and you are going to fulfill your duties. This is something you want to do after work, after your shift or before your shift, however you want to do it. Bring lunch, bring dinner, stay wherever, because if you want it, I really believe you'll do it.
How do you set
I'll
those?
just enable you there.
How do you set those employee expectations? So there's the time that you're in work, and then there's the time that you can do extra training and development. But what about that work time? Do you give people targets? Are there expectations? How does that work?
I've been extremely fortunate, but I know not many labs are. Culturally, the managers have really developed a culture of being finishing the job, and it might be kind of I don't know where they come. Maybe it's, for me, it's like mission first, right? It's military. You get the job done, whatever it takes. No one even has to ask for. Some companies, they do like overtime approval, whatnot. I said, no, you stay on the clock. You do what you need, and then you finish your job, and I will grade you, and I will evaluate you, and your managers will evaluate you based on performance. Where no one's gonna say, but this happened and that happened and this happened, because that could be a slippery slope, and that's a dangerous conversation to have. I'm just gonna say, hey, did you make it happen or not? And that's kind of a cold math. but at the same time, it really shows who's gonna kind of come through when it's hard. And then you give a little grace on the other side when you do the evaluation. You don't tell them that, but you go, oh, I understand this was happening. But setting the high bar there, saying yes or no, yeah, I think it helps with some good amount of employees.
So
Nice.
there's one last question here on this, Nick, and then please take it away. You've said some interesting things in our previous conversations about your development and your interaction and learning from mentors as a lab owner and operator. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. For me, my mentors come from my customers, our dentists. It was very different. Every lab technician seems to have a different idea of dentists. It's kind of weird. Some technicians think, hey, they don't know anything about lab work. They seem to always, they don't take their impressions are terrible, and they'll never learn, things like that. And then other technicians, which I'm kind of the opposite there, where I think for me, I go to my best customers who are just amazing people, who are amazing clinicians, amazing teachers, amazing, personally they're, you can see how fruitful their lives are really. And then I ask them for feedback, and if they have time to chat, I will go there. I've got mentors in which I drive to, on any given day, I'm working 12, 14, 16 hours. On the low end, it's 12 hours a day. And this is not 5 days a week. This is 7 days a week. On a Saturday, Sunday, I will be here 12 hours without fail. Christmas, I'll be here. But I'll still make time to drive to a dentist that is, who teaches, who I'll make 10 mistakes and they'll actually go, hey, Philip, what can I do better? And I'm like, no, I've got to learn from you. When they say that, this is the best, like one of the best dentists out there, and you look at it and most of the time, like, actually, that was my fault. Actually, this is actually on me. And so you start developing these personal relationships where you learn from each other, but really I'm young. I know there's a million things I don't know. And I know, if I don't have that mentorship or advice, and then I'll fail. These are crucial pieces of feedback that I bring back and kind of share with the rest of the employees, managers, whatnot, technicians, and tell them, hey, these doctors feel this way. Let's see if we can try something. He showed me this is the way to do it. And oftentimes they're right, and oftentimes it makes the business tremendously better. So having little pieces of paper for every doctor is not always the best way for us. For us, we pick our mentors, we pick our feedback loops. We go, hey, these are the people we can learn from. Because some dentists, and we all have them, everything's the lab's fault, nothing, they can't do anything right. For some reason, they never leave you. They just stick around. But we've had, life's too short. Might as let's work together here.
Along those lines, when you're working with getting feedback from your clients and maybe seeing they're right, you're right, whatever it may be, in alignment with that frictionless thought process, are you quick to credit things? Are you quick to redo things? Or are you negotiating fees at that point that you do things for 50%? How do you approach those friction points?
Yeah, money's not inconsequential. Finances is definitely not inconsequential. It is difficult, like I said, with capital equipment. Everybody knows, I don't know, these vendors probably their margins are great, and the labs, we have redos and all these other issues, and it's always tough. But the stance we've taken is really try to get to the bottom of the actual technical issue, and just ignoring the cost. So just letting them comp the case. And we really learned that from other winners in our industry. you know, for better or worse, we've got some pretty big winners, and they're very good at what they do. We've got Glidewell, we've got the NDXs of the world, we've DSG, just the largest of the large. These are amazing companies. They all understand how dentists on average feel and what is beneficial and what's not. And one of the things I've taken is that they tend to comp cases fast. They don't tend to squabble. They don't, because it's emotionally draining and you only have so much capacity a day. But furthermore, you never get to the bottom of something. You're really arguing a point. But if you take the money out of the equation and then talk to the doctor like two equals, hey, this is what I see, what do you see, and try to get to the bottom of it. If it's our fault, we won't make that mistake again. And even if it's the doctor's fault and we've comped it, we hope and we think on the average, the doctors will go, oh, I know that was my fault. They're showing me a lot of grace. They don't, they're always struggling for money too or whatnot. But yet they're going to comp me so fast and try to get to it. One day they'll come around. All that goodwill, they'll be like, okay, the next time I'm not going to argue about a bill. Next time I'm just going to pay on time. Next time, whatnot. And so I do think that's going to kind of come around. And, in the long run, it's just a better philosophy for us.
Interesting.
Do you ever fire customers? Is there a point at which there's just a problem and you need to resolve it by?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure every lab has experience. If we haven't gotten close to it, we will, or we have already. And we definitely have. We try to do it as respectful as possible. One of the obviously dangers of the internet age is that people just lie on reviews or whatnot. They can go online, they can do a ton of things, and just the power of one person can be damaging, but it can be uplifting at the same time. But there's no checks and balances. It's a very wild west.
The Economist yesterday had a headline that talked about how social media companies at the very beginning thought that, all information wanted to be free. What they didn't prepare for was that misinformation wants to be free too.
That is a good, that actually is, really funny. Because it's true. Happens all the time, they'll say something like, hey, terrible customer service, or this case was late. And we've had so many cases. And what you realize is that all the cases you've been FedExing out goes to the address that they've indicated, but they've actually wanted it to their house or something for some reason. And they never called it in, or I don't know, some oddball reason. And it's not, or FedEx loses the case. You're way early on the case. It's the day of the seating and they're yelling at you over the phone, where is this thing? You're just like, oh, I am so sorry, and we're going to make this right and all, but they can't get over the fact, and they want you to everything FedEx made a mistake on is your fault for some reason, which is not under your control. At the minimum, you're you got a patient in the chair, stop yelling, get to your job. Anyways, so you get all these things, but we have fired clients respectfully. Fired might be a hard word. Told them there are better fits for them, and there probably is, and the lines we draw is really human capital based. It has nothing to do with money, actually. Sure, we see people losing money. Some accounts actually lose a lot of money. It's just plain and simple. But we don't really draw hard lines on those. We draw hard lines when, for example, if they are extremely not acting like human beings. We are all professionals. They are professionals. They're highly educated folks. We give them respect mainly because, this is, they're doctors, right? We in society, we give them a lot of respect here. But the moment they act not like a human being, we cut them off. They're extremely rude and can affect the emotionally hurt or psychologically hurt one of our employees. We record every call and we say it on the actual answering machine. It was, all calls are recorded, and I listen to it and I go, is this a client that will be really, is this a client we want to work with? And I listen to it, and if in the case they, again, are abusive or things like that, we'll cut them off immediately. We'll gently say, we can't do it, I'm sorry, and we'll give them all their money back. It hurts us tremendously, losing clients in this day and age, losing, we've got COVID and all these things going on, so much uncertainty, but we'll drop them at the sake, we value our employees more than any particular client. And it's even our best clients, and we love them too. We love them all, but at the end of the day, there is a ranking system. Our employees come first, and their well-beings come first. And we will try anything for our clients, but that's kind of where my hierarchy stands.
I want to ask you so many questions, but one, you just mentioned COVID. I'm sure it's on everybody's mind and something that everybody's fighting through. Has your philosophy and approach to business, client development, employee development changed from pre-COVID to post-COVID world, Philip?
The backbone philosophy hasn't changed too much. But the execution has changed quite a bit, right? We all kind of behave differently. But right now, I mean, the philosophy essentially stays the same. We, in terms of development and things like that. But we all just kind of execute a little differently. It is a scary time for business, being a business and being a lab. You've got to put both hats on. It is a scary time, but I think we're trying to stay true. But it's hard. It's hard to stay like that. We've got people coming in asking for, their lab failed and they want a job here. And you hear these stories like they can't make ends meet or something happens. But for us, they don't meet the snuff or they don't meet the technical requirements. We just can't hire them as much as I would love to. And, we're always shorthanded. But it's just been tougher lately, I think.
We're getting to the end of this, the crucial time period. I don't want to go without asking you about just the analytics that you look at on a kind of daily basis. I know you're tapping in to that information of your managers multiple times a day, it seems, at least once a day. But then, do you have a dashboard that you could share with everybody, kind of key indicators that you watch, Philip, to manage your business?
And as a further note, maybe you've hired a data analyst as well to help you with that. Is that right?
Yeah. So we do have someone who kind of looks at the numbers, not only operationally, but also financially, things like that, where if you lost track, it could be more dire than, these are, when we keep track of things like cash flow, we don't really care about the balance sheet. The balance sheet kind of be damned. We want to see cash flow as opposed to, so with financial statements, you look at both things. So we have someone eyeing that stuff. We have someone eyeing essentially, actually in Labstar, we look at what's in the queue, right? That queue number is a perfect for us. That's the homepage too. That's kind of a neat part. Like it's on the homepage, and I know how many cases are just like stuck at the lab. And when I look at that number, I actually draw without anybody helping me. I actually go, hey, that means this much working capital is gone. That means this much overtime is being done. I draw so much from a singular number because, as you're doing cases, like I said, I spend so much of my time and that just being on the floor that I don't get to, you lose, it's a zero-sum game, like if I spend time here on the floor, I'm gonna lose time on strategic, looking at a lot of these metrics, which this is why we hire people that actually can see this for us and let me know, hey, Philip, we're going into the red zone. I don't know, But I can pair that with being on the floor. I know if I'm on the floor and there's frustrated technicians, you know, you can just kind of feel how busy they are. You know, you just generate this like, I hate to say like, you understand what's going on in the lab based on my experiences, and then I go back to people that we've essentially hired to look at the numbers for us and be like, is this true? What's going on? Like, am I like just feeling something wrong here? And then you can kind of calibrate, and it really helps. So yeah, the number of cases in the queue is important. Cash flow is extremely important. And we know certain product lines are very big, right? Zirconia, probably one of the biggest in most labs. But I look at my zirconia bill. I actually don't look at any other bill. I look at my zirconia bill, and my biggest implant milling. So like, we mill at every authentic manufacturer, and I look at my big implant bills, custom abutment milling bills. And I kind of judge based on those numbers and just in the heartbeat, like what's going on in the health of the lab. Obviously, there are many other metrics, and my daily conversations help with the human capital part. But as numerical values go, those are very big indicators for me.
I love it. I love that working process number 2 in LabStar, right where it is, and it's on the homepage as well. Interesting that you're looking at that too. Boy, I couldn't really all the insight you have and just the intuitive nature that you go through, very sophisticated thoughts, but simplify them, Phil, has really been intriguing to me and actually inspiring to me personally. It kind of helps me rethink how I'm approaching things when I'm consulting with labs. Thank you. And anything about the future, what do you, do you expect to grow from here? Have you, here the rest of 2020, looking at 2021, are you still on this trajectory of risk-taking, growth, planning for growth, maybe moving strategically to get growth from more clients, less clients, more client development? Could you share anything with people about the future here? What your strategies are?
Yeah, absolutely. We are aggressively trying to take on different types of risk. We spent a lot of time, like one of the product lines, and I'm sure everybody knows about it, like 3D printed like mouth guards. It's kind of, you can see some of the major players like Argent and things like that, Full Contour, they're all looking at 3D printed mouth guards. They've got services available now. I think Argent's doing a beta test, but it's on their website. It's a pretty good indicator. Lab information is very sparse, very kind of piecemealed. No one really knows numbers, right? But if anybody knows numbers, I may have a handful of really smart people who can try to deduce, try to get numbers, but really the guys who really know the numbers, if anybody, it will be the Argents, the Glidewells, the NDXs. They all know the number, Evident or Full Contour, they'll know the numbers. If anybody, they've got the best data, and based on their moves, we can adapt. So one of the things we really noticed was they were just pushing these mouth guards. They've got ads saying how profitable this is, and we've got ads of like how much it's growing. We see the actual innovation being kind of peaking here with mouth guards. It's kind of actually working. Like it's not back in the day, trying to mill a mouth guard never made technical sense to me, because yeah, it's really accurate, but how are you going to hit the weird undercut? And if the mill misses it, you're just going to have a piece that you can't reline or anything, and it's going to be like loose on a model. You spend 4 hours on a mill. Who has that much time on a mill, to be honest? Like every mill should be just going as much as you can. It's 4 hours or 3 to 4 hours a mouth guard. Crazy. But yeah, so strategically we're adding product lines, so we're trying to learn, because pursuing that, we found that there were some issues with this. We found that certain things don't work and certain things work. But we're aggressively putting a lot of our time and efforts into these other product lines. We're aggressively going at, now is actually a phenomenal time. This webinar, phenomenal. To do Zoom meetings, to do things virtually, that expands your reach so immensely. And so we will do, we already signed up with some of the major manufacturers for implants to be some of their education labs, in which we'll do Zoom type or, webinar type education sessions for doctors. Because we built out a beautiful conference room, right? And we won't be using it. No CEs here.
Right.
So we're just going to readapt that conference room, and we're just going to put some IT equipment in there. We're going to put in things so we can do webinars, so we can do CE credits for doctors, and now they have to do it and almost have to accept this new style of learning. Might as well be ahead of everyone and try to adapt. So yeah, we've got a lot of things that we're excited about. We think it's the right direction, but
Awesome.
you never know.
So yeah, the idea of risk was one of the sort of takeaways that we had from our previous conversations, and a little bit of a headline here. In terms of risk, are you saying that you go for a product segment, a specific product, buying more technology? What is the risk that you're sort of talking about 3 minutes ago?
In every front, really. I like, I really draw inspiration, not just from our own industry, but everywhere else. And I'm sure everybody does too. We all got, other interests than, I love the lab world, but, we've got other interests. Mine's kind of the IT tech type thing. And I read this article about how Tesla does things. And one of their things they do is they launch a product line, and at like 50% completion, essentially, they just push it out there. And the moment they start getting feedback for things to fix, they just fix it real fast. Their goal of the game is to start catching up, fix it. But they launch understanding that's kind of the path they're taking. They're not doing it carelessly, really. They're doing it understanding this will be a harm. And so from product lines to people, things like that, most of us, all lab owners, we've done it long enough. We understand there's sometimes a gut call you make. And it's not bad to trust your gut at times. You see all the data, you try to make the best guess. Of course, you never, if you got free data, look at it.
Right.
It's free. But then you go back to that very last bit of making the actual move, actually buying a carbon or leasing a carbon printer, which is ungodly expensive for a mount card that pays out $50. And you're just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this payment on this printer? But you just need to make the move. You just need to take that next step and say, I believe in what I see. I believe in it, and make the move, or else you'll just be paralyzed, kind of go nowhere.
So I just want to note that you have been addressing many of the questions that have come up, like how do you deal with customers? Do you fire them? How do you, push back on employees? How do you teach them? How do you, things like that. So we've kind of come up to the end, but the several questions that we've got, there's a way in Zoom that you answer it in the conversation stream. And so we've been doing that. And I think it's time to bring this session to a close. Nick, do you have any comments?
Philip, I really can't thank you enough. If nobody else was listening, I certainly was, but I have a feeling that everybody was too, and taking copious notes. Just all of your little, the way you describe things, and the how specific you are in your steps and your processes. So I've enjoyed everybody in this series, and equally I've enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you, Philip.
Yes, thank you. It's so interesting to see that through your background, training, and actual operation, implementation, execution. As Nick said, you really have an intuitive grasp. You've chosen certain indicators and you don't get bogged down in the details. You trust your team, you put your mission first. I mean, this sounds like, you know, high-level Army officer training, you know, that it's being used right now. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Jeff.